In this video, I'm going to break down my process for research and planning the port days. I cover all the possibilities such as excursions through the cruise line, independent excursions, as well as independent exploring, or thinking about maybe you just want to stay on the ship that day. This is the 5th video in a series where I talk about planning a solo cruise. Step 1 is your pre-cruise port research. Doing this research in advance is really important, especially if you are prone to decision fatigue, and that can feed into anxiety, which can lead into overwhelm, and that's all the things you want to avoid if you're planning a vacation. The next step is to get yourself organized and think about where you might store this information as you're researching. I use a basic note-taking app, but use whatever works for you, and I create a table. Here's mine, and you can see the kind of information I've captured around the port.
Editing Lisa here. I thought I would quickly clarify what I record in this table. So I include which day of the cruise, the hours that we're in port or country security details, possible activities or excursions in the area, and then anything happening on the ship that I might want to do at some point during the day or in the evening. You can find the exact ports and times you're in the port on a cruise website. And if you've already booked after you log into your account, you can find that information, and it'll be on the PDF that they send you if you've already booked.
Next thing you want to do is start researching each of the ports that you're going to. And the first website I recommend is called whatsimport.com. And you can see it has all kinds of great details about each port, including things like where it is in relation to things around it. Because as you've probably seen by now, cruise ships will advertise a destination, but the cruise port is quite a distance away. So that's something you need to bear in mind. Next is the Facebook group and the Cruise Critic Roll Call. These are forums for each individual sailing. So each specific sailing has its own group on Facebook. Somebody will create it. Same for Cruise Critic. And these are basically online forums for everybody who's booked onto the same cruise, and people can exchange information. Next, I like to look at Google Maps. So using the information I know about where the pier is for the cruise, I can then pinpoint it exactly on the map, and that gives a better visual picture about what's around, especially if there's any things you might want to buy before you get back on the ship. If you search for the port name and say port name and cruise, or cruise pier, you could usually see it pretty accurately. There's a chance there might be more than one, but in a lot of smaller ports, there's just the one. And oftentimes in the satellite view, you can actually see a cruise ship, so you can see exactly where it is. Another thing you could try is if you wanted to see visually what the port was like, if you just look on YouTube, a lot of people have done port tours, and that's such a good idea. I wish I'd done that. I do need to mention safety. Depending on where you're going in the world, some of the destinations may not be as similar levels that you're used to. Like, they're never going to be dangerous. Obviously, the cruise isn't going to take you there. There can be some additional warnings or information that you should be aware of. I like to look at the US State Department website on travel advisories, as well as the UK's Foreign Office, because they assign a rating to each of these destinations, or just use the list that's relevant to your passport. I also want to shout out travelriskmaps.com, because they have a more visual layout of the risks that you might face in each country. So I should say all 3 of these are country level. So with the travel risks map, you can flick between things like medical, security, climate change, and mental health. Good to know. About now, you should be updating your cruise table of the different ports. So capturing the things that are important to you. So that's where the ship is in relationship to destination. I also like to note down if it's one that I could explore independently if I wanted to, because to be honest, that's what I do most of the time now. And for me, independent means that I can either walk off the ship and be in the town, or I walk off the ship and there's some sort of transportation that's available to me as a cruise passenger, either provided specifically for cruise passengers, or the public transportation is usually fine and easy to use. Also, it'll be much cheaper than whatever is available to the cruise passengers. In fact, in one port, it was $25 to do a round trip on the specific motor coach to the town, and it's a 30-minute journey, whereas the public bus was $2 New Zealand dollars. Big difference. On the cruise table, I also like to note down any activities I need to be back on ship for, because the timings might not work out if you have any commitments the next day, especially early morning. It's just sort of good to, I don't know, for me, I like to balance things out.
I should also add that you'll want to be sure of the ship time, because it can vary to the local time. And also make sure you grab information about the port. If you are going on excursion, make sure you grab information about If you are going on an excursion, make sure you grab information about the harbor master. If you are going out on an excursion, make sure you grab information about the harbor master and their contact details, because if you ever do think you might be late, you can sometimes try to reach them, and that's the best way to prevent the ship from leaving without you. It might work. That's so I'm told.
Hello. Hey. All right, so now you have a table and you have a list of what's in the ports and whether you have the option to do something independently. So now you can see that there might be days you want to do an excursion, either because it's going to be a hassle to get to the town, or there's not much there, or you just want to see what's available. So now it's time to look at excursions. So one of the very first places I like to look is the third-party aggregators. So talking like Viator, Get Your Guide. And they're pretty good for just showing what's available. Look at what the cruise is providing, because they'll also have a really good selection. Also, you could look at smaller tour companies. They might have smaller tours. These tend to offer great value for money. They just come with one caveat, and that is if it's not booked through the cruise line itself, there's no guarantee that the ship will wait for you if you're not back in time. If you're feeling undecided, go back to your roll call or anywhere in Cruise Critic and see if you can catch some reviews of the different excursions. And each of the third-party aggregators will have reviews of the tours as well. And also, if you're undecided, almost every port I've been to has had some kind of shoreside tours available. They just wait for you to show up and they sell you a tour. And I think in most cases, they're pretty much ready to whisk you away. Maybe they wait a little bit to see if they can fill up the van, but these offer great value for money also. But the same caveat applies: is the ship's not going to wait if you're late. I used the shoreside shuttle service in French Polynesia in Moorea, and I think I paid like $5, and it was a shuttle bus from the port area to this area of the island that had all of the shops and restaurants, and there was the beach a few minutes walk away. So that meant I get to spend part of my day walking around the beach area and also have some lunch. And on the way back to the ship, the woman who was driving let me stay in the van with the AC running, and she went back to check if there's any other beach people that were coming with us. But it was a really useful $5 I spent. By now, you should have an idea of what some of the excursions are costing, and you should start to think about if you have an overall budget for your shore activities, because it can add up quite a bit. The easiest thing would be to pre-book in advance through the cruise line, because they'll deliver the ticket to your cabin sometime before the cruise. There will be instructions on where to meet on the ship, exit the ship together, and then you're all brought back. So from that point of view, it's super easy. If you're a first timer, I would recommend going this route. It's also the most expensive because you are paying for that extra service of being escorted, essentially. At the same time, if you're one of these people where your energy levels can fluctuate a lot on the day, then maybe you just sort of see how you feel on the day, and that's fine too. When I think about each of the excursions, I like to kind of think about what the potential sensory impact is going to be and the activity levels. Activity levels, they usually cover this, but it's things like how many hours will you be driving? How many stops are you getting on and off the bus? Another thing to think about is where you're going to be driving. A lot of times there can be winding roads, and if you're prone to car sickness, that's not a lot of fun. So just something to be aware of. And also knowing what the physical demands are. So if you're going to be on your feet a lot, you have to stand, swimming, climbing up and down off of a boat. And if you are on a boat, then thinking about seasickness, because the smaller boats might cause more of an issue. And then other sensory things like, will it be really noisy, crowded? Other things like, I went to a rum distillery and the smell was pretty potent. Consider in advance really is weather generally, so you pack accordingly for that. Other practicalities to think up front are having a day pack. So I have this foldable backpack that has been super useful for all sorts of shore activities. And depending on what excursion you book, you might need to remember to bring swimwear, or if you're snorkeling, either do you bring your own or can you rent? Usually they allow you to rent, and just thinking about how much that's going to cost. Also, just the whole issue of money and cash. A lot of places are still cash-based, so you'll need to think about what the expectations are around tipping, or if you need additional cash for things like drinks, additional food, or souvenirs. The next one is really boring, but it's reading the fine print, so the cancellation policies. If you've booked to the cruise line and the port is missed for whatever reason, then no problem. You'll just be refunded automatically to your stateroom balance. If it's an independent tour, I know that some don't make you pay if the ship can't dock. I don't know if that's the norm. And again, always just pay attention to the reviews of the tour company itself. So now you have a list of your port days. You have an idea of what you might do on each port day. So now it's time to think about whether you're going to pre-book anything or wait till closer to the time, or you can just completely embrace the flexibility and decide on the day. And maybe that decision is you want to stay on the ship, and that makes total sense too, because after all, you've paid for it. Cruise lines often offer discounts for things when they're at port because there's lower demand. So for example, if you wanted to get a massage, you might get a discount then. You won't be limited to just hanging out at the pool. There'll still be activities on, like trivia and other things that happen. It's also worth noting that the cruises often have discounts on excursions. In my last experience, it was about 6 to 8 weeks before the departure, and they were offering 20% off. Now I want to hear from you. Put in the comments below if you have any questions about excursion booking or excursion planning. And if you have, I'd love to hear your tips. Like, how do you organize your excursions? Now, picture this. You've arrived in port. It's morning. I like to do a check about how I'm feeling that day. So I like to think about how rested I feel, how overwhelmed am I feeling in this cruise environment, and also just check in on my social energy levels, as well as think about if I'm committed to anything in the evening or the next day. If you have pre-booked an excursion and your energy levels are low, then you can try to cancel. You may not get your money back. It's going to depend on whatever the cancellation policy is. If you decide to go ahead, even if you're feeling low energy, that's fine too. Just lower your expectations. At this point, you might have some other friends with you that you've met on the ship, or maybe you're traveling with other family members. That's fine. Just make it clear that your energy levels are where they are. Take all the breaks you need. In fact, I would even tell your tour guide if you need any special accommodations. So for example, I was doing a tour and I just asked if I could sit down in the shade a few times, and that's fine as long as they know where you are. That's the main thing. If you don't have an excursion booked and you just want to explore independently, that's my favorite thing to do. Just kind of make it up as you go along. Go for a coffee, do some shopping, find somewhere with Wi-Fi. So on this last cruise, I did a lot of independent exploration, either grabbing a coffee, going to the library for Wi-Fi, and then I met somebody that I like to do some walks with, so we did some really fantastic walks. So that was really nice. I didn't have anything booked. The other solos that I traveled with, a lot of them did have excursions booked, so their plans were already set in stone. But in some ways that's good because it takes away some of the decision making on the day. Like, that's all done for them. In the past, I have definitely taken some fantastic excursions. One of the best one was river tubing in Grenada. It was really fun and something I could have never done independently. Also on that same cruise, I got out at St. Lucia and I only went as far as the immediate port area. I had a couple drinks and I got back on the ship because I just was so tired. Does mean I need to go back to St. Lucia though. So just remember, it's your vacation, it's your port day, and just to do what works best for you. If you like the sound of a cruise, either because it takes you to some fantastic places where you don't have to unpack, or because you like the idea of disconnecting for a while, but you're a little bit overwhelmed by the idea of planning it all, but you'd like some support planning your solo adventure, I'm a travel coach. You can check me out at betterndtravel.com. So to summarize, do your pre-cruise research, shortlist some activities, figure out what's going to work best for you and your energy, and enjoy. Share your comments, tips, ideas in the comments below, and they change the order, but